It's time for bookkeeping, beer, and BS. I didn't realize you had run a window. I knew you ran a window cleaning business. I didn't realize you were doing it for 15 years. Where were you at? Give us some, what were some of the big takeaways for you, and how'd you transition into the equipment side of it? What was that? What was that like?
Well, I've known Chris and Alex, the owners. Chris technically started windowcleaner.com, which is window cleaning resource, I think that's been maybe 12 years ago, 13 years. So I knew those guys way back when, and I started going to conferences, and I'd meet up with them, and they're just good buddies. So the business and everything went great. I love business. I love doing businesses. I've always had little businesses. Even as a kid, I sold candy bars out of my backpack, that kind of thing, And then I did this for quite a long time until I went on vacation. Actually, we had some friends move to where I moved now in North Carolina, and my wife and I talked about it, and we're like, we want to move. So we went down to vacation in July. It was on July 4th, and then by the first week in October, we were moved down here. So it was a pretty quick thing, but that's the only reason I sold, is because it was that point where I wanted to move, and I really, really, really didn't want to be a business owner from another state.
Yeah. How big was your business? Was it even? I think there's a point where you need that second, I don't know, the Robin to your Batman, if you will, to even consider being remote. Where were you on that? Were you thinking about trying to run a remote, or was it just never even a thought? So we opened a second location when I was still open in the next state down. And the planning wasn't there, and the people I thought I had there wasn't there. So we ended up having an office that we ran jobs out of, but it didn't do what I thought. So in my brain, we had that lease space for a year before we're we're just going to stop the lease. We're going to redo it all and then get the staff right. And after that, when I decided I was moving, I was like, man, how much would it suck if I was down in North Carolina, 13-hour drive, and the main dude quit. Even besides quitting, imagine if he broke his leg or, God forbid, died or something. And then all of a sudden it's well, how do I hire another number one from another state? It's hard enough to get tech. So it was a scary, scary idea, and it just didn't make sense. Yeah. And what, I don't want to ask valuation, but were you able to get what you wanted for it by selling it to internal versus, did you even list it or shop it around, or was it just I know this is the right guy, I know it's the right price, just do it?
So that I was really, really lucky that way, because the big thing in business is take a burden off of you. We have enough of them, right? We talked about before, firing somebody who is a thorn in your side is the biggest release. That feeling it's the reason people hire bookkeepers. They hate it. So why do it, right? They hire it off. Doing those little things. I don't know if
I should appreciate that comment, or
you should. You should to understand the idea, the concept. We clean windows because people hate cleaning windows. If you ask them, name the top 3 things you hate to do, it's going to be yard work, it's going to be window cleaning probably, and maybe cleaning the house. Well, guess what? A really great services to be in are things that people hate doing, right?
Yeah.
Well, as business owners, the less pressure, the better off you are. That's why we got into business. So not having that headache and that worry and that he still runs it. The same guy I sold it to runs it. But when I sold it to him, I knew I wanted to sell it to him. I knew that I would take the amount of risk on my side because I know the person I was selling it to, right? It wasn't just a stranger. So I took most of the risk, but I also got paid for the risk. So we ended up having an interest rate on the purchase. It ended up being a 4-year buyout with equipment. And I know about 4 or 5 other people who sold businesses, and I did really, really well on selling it, just because I know I structured it that way. But because I took the risk, I also got the rewards out of it. So
nice. That's cool. Isn't it usually common you go, it's my price, your terms, or your price, my terms? If you price, it's all cash and I'm done.
Yeah, there's
Or like the
people ask
buyout.
that a lot too. As soon as they find out that you've sold a business, everybody wants to know. Just because even if it's not in their head, it's like someday I'll be done with this. What do I want to do? And I always tell people, like, there's a couple ways to sell it. There is, here's a check, we'll shake hands and you're done. And then there is a buyout with terms and all that fun stuff. And then there's due on completion and all that. And the farther you go out, the more money you make, but the more you're accepting the liability, right?
Yeah, you definitely have the risk.
So there's people who just go, hey, you know what? Here's my company. Everybody thinks their company's worth like $3 million. That's not really what it is. But here's my company. And somebody comes to you and goes, well, here's a check for $50,000, right? You go, well, that's not a lot. But you literally do this. You go cash your check and you're done, right?
Yeah.
If you're doing a buyout, you're going to make a lot more money. But now understand that in a 4-year buyout, our terms were that within 4 years, if he defaulted, I got the company back. And everybody's like, well, that's great. No, not really. When you're living in another state, it's not a great thing. So, you understand that eventually you get pot committed, right? After the halfway mark, it's like, well, it's actually cheaper for me to keep paying on this than it is to default. But in the real terms is that, what would I have done if even at year 3, he just was like, yeah, like I'm done. I can't do it anymore. It's like, well, now I have an asset that, what did he deteriorate in the paperwork? It also explained like deteriorating value. So when I handed the company over, it was, a really high value, at that time. And anything deviating from that value, he was actually liable for if he did hand it back. Because you can't sell a company that's making, say it makes $1 million, you hand a company over, you get it back 3 years later, and it's only doing $200,000. That doesn't translate. They're not, you've lost asset at that point. So there's a lot of stipulations to it, but I knew him and I knew the person he was. So I knew that no matter what happened, he would sell, his left boot so he could make the payment to me. So I took a calculated risk.
Hey, what's up, business nerd? Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you learned a heck of a lot watching that episode. Do me a favor, subscribe right down here. And if you really like what you saw, you got more goods right here. Check out this one or check out this one and do this. Go subscribe. Appreciate you. Work smarter, work harder, go earn yourself some pride. Catch you on the next one.